Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are. Welcome to the Vegan World 2026 Moonshot podcast. And today we are going to be talking about how do we take action on climate change. And we are joined by two, James Desmond and Jamin Shively, who are planning to take action. And I want to know what prompted them to do this and what they're planning to do. Let me start with you, James. Uh, what drives you into taking action on climate change?
What drives me? Um, whew, I would just say it's just for the sheer sense that it's the right thing to do. It is
Mhm.
it is obviously the right thing to do, and to do the opposite or to go contrary to you know what we're trying to do here. No, basically the world is doing nothing in the face of the planet falling apart. The ecologiums of the planet are falling apart, and we're just busy trying to destroy each other in the meantime, um, without actually taking the time to have the proper conversations as to what is actually happening in the whole complete story. And
Mhm.
if you actually take the time, just a little time, just to look into the facts, and you don't get it on the mainstream, unfortunately, but you just look at it, look into the information, and it's shocking. And once you look into that information, and once you get that initial shock, there's no going back because it is the right thing to do. There is no
Right.
other forward. There is no other path for me now in life other than to try and do as much as I can with the groups of people that I'm coming across. And there's lots of people out there. This is again what we're here for, Mr. Jamin, because Jamin's really is the brainchild behind the idea of the collective human intelligence, basically. You know,
Mhm.
and it's the only way we're going to be able to solve our problems is if we come together in conversation, and there is no other alternative because at this stage now, what we're actually doing otherwise is putting our hands up and saying that we're not really the smartest species on the planet. We're actually destroying it and witnessing it as we do it. We've actually made
Mhm.
any effort whatsoever to do something in the contrary. So I'm probably babbling, but basically it's right, and it's right that drives me all the time.
Right.
Yeah, thanks, Sailesh.
Thanks, James. How about you, Jamin? What drives you?
Thank you, Sailesh. By the way, I'd like to ask everyone to mute their microphones. We're getting some echo. Um,
Yeah, I can mute. Yeah.
okay, great, thanks. So what drives me is I I love life. I don't always love my life, but I love life. I love nature, and I see what a terrible rut we've gotten ourselves into. And I could spend all day talking about that rut, but basically, we were all born into a game that none of us designed, that none of us participated in the design of. And it's basically, hey, here's how the game works. Get out there and take and take and take, because that's how you're going to survive. If you don't accumulate, if you don't hoard, at the end of the day, what are you going to eat? So all of us bought into that game at different levels in different cultures in different places around the world. And now, having all of us more or less all of us embraced this taking culture, we've taken and taken and taken, and now the planet has nothing left to give, and it's drying up, overheating, and it's time for us to make the most profound radical shift in all of human history, which is to go from takers to caretakers. And I know that change is possible. I've been part of change movements all my life. My father was a great inspiration to me, and so I'm driven by a love for life and a conviction that we can transform humanity, and we can all survive and thrive. And I know that conversation is the access to that. I don't know what's going to come out of the conversation, but I know we need to dive into it in order to get somewhere. Thank you. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Jamin. Yeah, the great systems specialist, I would say, Donella Meadows. She was talking about leverage points in a system. How do systems change? And basically, she came up with a list of 12 leverage points that you could push on, and of course, the most important one is paradigm shift, shifting the paradigm as to why are we here. So, what is your what would be a response to the question, why are human beings here on this planet? So let me start with you, Jamin, and then I'll ask James to respond to that.
Yeah, no, great question. I think we're here, I believe, and again, I'll ask everyone to mute because we're definitely getting some feedback. The I believe we're here to learn and to evolve and to become what you, Sailesh, call Homo ahimsa, the caretaker species. That's why I believe why we're here. We're here to love each other and all of life on Earth. I mean, we're like an alcoholic father, head of household, who hasn't quite learned yet what his role in life is. It's not for his own pleasure. It's not for addressing his own pain or no. It's not about you anymore, buddy. Right? It's about the whole of the household. Well, now let's scale up from one head of household to humanity, which is basically the head of the household of the planet. And yet we're completely schizophrenic. We're too busy fighting against each other, competing against each other to see who can out-hoard each other in this omnicidal game. And we're obviously blessed with such intellectual and communication and spiritual faculties, right? We cannot simply be here to participate in some knockdown, drag out violence fest like we're in right now. We must be here for a higher purpose. I don't have a background in spiritual studies or anything like that, so I don't pretend to be any grandmaster, but I know we're here for a much higher purpose than just hoarding and violence and dying. And that is precisely to live and to help all life live and thrive. And with that, I pass the feather. Thank you.
I think I asked myself that question an awful lot, even today. I mean, not today specifically, but at this present time in my life, I ask myself that question even more so, I suppose, than I did when I was younger and searching for, as we all do, we get curious about our religion. Why are we here? There's always that time in our life when we start asking those questions. I started asking those questions fairly young, all right, and I think we'll always be asking ourselves those questions because all of us are lost. That's basically where I find myself anyway. I find myself lost, but looking out at the rest of the world, the wider world, my own family and my friends, my neighbours, my community and extended global community, we're lost because somewhere along the way, because we actually had it right from the beginning. We were in harmony with nature. We respected nature, and we only took from nature what nature provided and what we needed, and we always looked after. And then I'm talking about from an indigenous kind of aspect now of it in a sense, but I'm an indigenous person from an island of Ireland here on the west of Europe. And so I can speak on behalf of the indigenous people in a sense because I am indigenous, and I know that the indigenous Irish, were in harmony with the island that they lived on, which was completely covered in trees at the time, and we weren't into large scale farming and agricultural practices as such. We lived in harmony with nature, and we lived by the seasons, and we lived by what nature provided for us by the seasons, and our societies worked together in mutual harmony because it was the only thing you can do. And I believe we were then on a journey, and unfortunately the way situations went, and as we all know where we are and where we ended up today, somehow or another, um, we ended up depending on single leaders of our communities instead of having community leadership. And what happened with single leaders is it's a simple, it's a human fact. They become, let's say, let's just for the sake of not being anywhere in negative, but they become changed people by their position, and for some reason or another, when these groups of people have to interact because of different communities, different countries, whatever, it changed over a long period of time, obviously, and we are now where we find ourselves today, lost on a planet that we have separated ourselves from all life, living life on the planet. We believe that we are now the dominant, owners of everything, and we can take and reap as we want without regard for the consequences. And we're all wandering around thinking that our lives mean that we must get up and work from 9 to 5 and work hard and get a mortgage and get a home and get that car, even if it's on hire purchase, and work hard, hard, hard until you're old enough to retire. And then when you get sick, because of all the poisons you put into your body over your life, they'll take your home off you in order to put you and take care of you in a little home and feed you with some more medications to see you on your way. And that's it. That is why we're all lost, because we know that's the journey ahead. It's after being laid out for us because we've set it for ourselves. And that's why we're all lost, because every single one of us are individuals. And individually, I know her because I speak with my daughter all the time, like as if she is my best friend. My family, we talk closely when we're not arguing. But I know that each and every one of us feel that. And I know that this is true all over the world. We all feel it's individually that we're here for some special purpose. And we are, simple and plain, we are here for some special purpose, but it's lost to us. It's lost to us because we have given over our power to single leadership instead of community leadership, and we've destroyed our God-given mother and all creation around us. It's falling apart around us now, and here we are striding towards war. What kind of crazy kind of species are we, really, in fairness? Sometimes I believe maybe our destiny is to be parasites, because that's what we're proving ourselves to be, a parasitic species that's destroying this planet. It's either that or we have lost ourselves, and I choose the latter. We've lost ourselves, and we need to find our path forward. I'll leave it at that because I'm rambling.
Thank you. What do you say to those Noam Chomsky, the so-called opinion makers of the world, who say that looking at other planets, and since we are not getting any signal from any other planet, it looks like the purpose of intelligent life is to kill itself off. So all intelligent civilizations eventually kill themselves off. So that's the conclusion they've reached, and they say, okay, this is what we're doing now. What do you say to that storytelling?
Well, personally, I would say that that's just unfortunately a trait of where we've over generations and thousands of years have found ourselves now. We also have found ourselves in a mental frame of thought as well. And there are philosophers like Noam Chomsky out there, very wise people like that. But, you know, we all have our different views on what of this kind of situation. But I mean, I believe that he may believe that we're destined for civilizations and everything to collapse. They've proven that they have over time. But again, that goes back to what I just said prior. What is civilization? It's something that we have put in our heads, or that leaders have put in our head. That civilization is an excuse to go and civilize those that you consider to be less than you, and therefore you have dominion over them because you're civilized, they're not, because you choose to say they're not. Even though you blinded yourself to facts that they were civilized far before and long before your generation or your nations ever even rose up out of the ground. They were already civilized. But you turn a blind eye to that to prove that you're civilized. And then you create, it's just the same pattern over and over again. Yes, civilizations have collapsed because they were led by single leaders. Simple as that. Not community. It's as simple as that. That's why they collapsed, ultimately.
How about you, Jamin? How would you address that kind of criticisms?
Yeah. That intelligent life, its mission is to destroy itself. That reminds me of when I was a young kid in school and on a very negative gyration. It's the species level equivalent of a 10-year-old who's doing poorly in school saying, no, my whole point here is to fail and quit and ultimately kill myself. It's a civilizational temper tantrum, right? That is expressed through thought leaders like Noam Chomsky, who I have a lot of respect for, a lot of the great work he's done in his life. But this is one area where I have a complete difference with him. Our planet supports life because of very, very special conditions. There's a great little documentary called The Privileged Planet that came out some 20 years ago or plus. And the conditions are extremely rare. And, we're developing our technology by leaps and bounds these days. We simply don't have sensitive enough telescopes and good enough AI to tease out the signal of intelligent life from wherever it's coming. And we're talking about huge distances here and attenuating signals. So it's a real challenge. But it's worth looking at why we have come to this point of temper tantrum. It is heartbreaking, right? We're living in a world where we're looking at a world where ourselves, our children, our grandchildren are simply not going to be able to survive. And we've been on the same fundamental paradigm, which I'll sum up as James said, leaders and hierarchy and all that we're supposed to just follow leaders and that we can actually own this planet. From an indigenous perspective, that's as ridiculous as one person saying, I'm going to own the ocean or half the ocean or something ridiculous like that. So we're all kind of on this temper tantrum right now because life looks to us like such a failure, right? Fail. Of course, we want to burn the whole school down and quit and declare it a massive failure and ourselves a failure. But we've got to hang in there and have faith that we're here for a higher purpose than to destroy ourselves or just own, control, take, destroy, etc. And we're discovering that right now. Like right now already, 15 minutes into this conversation, I feel way better than I felt 15 minutes ago. This is how life should be. We wake up in the morning, we gather around, last night's campfire, and we look at each other in the face and we say, okay, what are we going to do? That's how life should be. That's how life was originally. And we would figure stuff out together. We're on this insane hyper-individualist trip, which is making us all depressed and anxious, and it's leading us all to do our part in destroying life on Earth. So what's needed here is just more conversation. We need to get together and wake up and show up at last night's campfire, all tired and achy and, and just show up and get in conversation like we're doing right now. And you do such a wonderful job of it, Sailesh and James and Jamin for that matter. And so the three of us and people like us have the noblesse oblige of leading people back in the morning to last night's campfire, where we can brush ourselves off and say, okay, what are we going to do now? It's the only thing to do. I mean, versus what are we doing? We wake up and we think about money and we think about job and we think about promotion versus getting fired. None of that is natural. None of that is natural at all. The campfire paradigm says, if you're here, you belong here. And we're all in this together, right? let's move our community forward. Now we have to do some massive scaling up in terms of our conceptualization of community from 100 people to 8 billion. Well, let's get on it. We've got the intellectual capacity, we've got the communication capacity. And with that, I pass back the talking feather. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jamin. Which brings me to what you're planning to do. So let's get into this idea of having conversations and getting people to start thinking about why are we here and what are we doing about it. Because I tell people, as soon as we admitted that we are changing the climate of the planet, we owned it. We own the climate of the planet. So if the climate is going haywire, it's your responsibility. If the climate is stable, well, you did a good job. So it's a little bit of about becoming an adult, right? As a species, understanding that we are not put here just to amuse ourselves, but to actually do something. So, what are you planning to do about having more conversations around this? Let's start with James.
Well, it's more of a question of what have we been doing, really, I suppose. And I would say, really, Jamin should really take this because it's initially from the get-go. Jamin, I mean, I jumped on board with Jamin back in February of 2020 when he started the live streaming on YouTube, doing the collective intelligence conversation, the block party, which we still do every Friday, 24 hours on the Zoom meetings, and the recordings are up on YouTube, and sometimes we do live streaming as well now. But the ultimately, I was at a stage when I came across Jamin back in I suppose December of 2019. I was at that stage. I was not long just after graduating college. I know I'm 55 this year, but I went back to college after because I couldn't work because of an injury, and I decided to go back and I went to college anyway. I got a degree and in fine art, and I finished in 2019. But at that stage, I barely got through the college because I was depressed out of my head because when I was studying for my thesis, I also, part of my subject that I was choosing, the climate issue and existential threats came into it. And straight away, I started looking into it for my thesis and do more research. And the more I looked, the more I realized how much of a problem we had on our hands. And my attention became more focused on the climate situation than it did in my actual thesis at the time. And I barely got through that and kind of really made a half-hearted effort at my thesis because by that time I was getting into a depression because I had really gotten into the science of what's happening with our climate. And I know I always say climate because that's the way the average person understands it, but it's not really. Climate is just one symptom of our climate changing. It's just one symptom. There's so much and so many things going wrong at the moment, and they're all piling up now to the tipping points that we all hear about. And we're running out of time, basically. So at that stage, I had come to the conclusion because, as most of the scientists were as well, even the IPCC are stating it, we're facing extinction very shortly if we don't actually do something about it. The IPCC are saying we know of about 2 years to act, and we've been saying, Jamin's been saying this for a number of years. We should have been acting 30 years ago. And had we come together in conversation and started talking about our problems, in essence, 30 years ago, we wouldn't be sitting here having these conversations now, I believe. We would be having far more pleasant conversations. But we're heading down a one-way path. There is another road, but at the moment, everybody seems to have their blinders on and can't see the other road. And unfortunately, the path we're on is a path of destruction for all life on Earth. And I believe what Jamin was trying to do was bring people together in conversation, because without conversation, you can't start anything and get anything going. And this is what we need to do. But again, without the idea of depending on single leaders, because they've proven right to this point now, even right now with the last COP26, that our leaders are not even dealing or facing up to the problem that's happening. and that's ongoing and exponential, and they're not even addressing it. Instead, they're now, unfortunately, they seem to be promoting a global war, possible nuclear war, and that's, to me, that's psychotic. When the science has been presented to them years ago, and the latest IPCC report is horrifying even to me. And I'm not a scientist, but if you look at it and just even get the gist of what's going on with the systems, it's horrifying. And our leaders are orchestrating a war. And I will say orchestrating because there was plenty of time, and there still is time, always is. Ireland has always proved that there's always time to come to the table and talk and to bring peace to your society and everything else before the better of everyone. And we've proven that. You know what I mean? 1,000 years of colonialism, basically, 1170 to when the English arrived in Ireland first to the 1992. So we had the peace treaty. It took nearly 1,000 years, but it still happened because at the end of the day, nothing is sorted unless you sit down and talk. And our leaders are not doing it. But Jamin believes, and I believe, that we're looking to the wrong people anyway. We should be looking to each other. It's to each other we should be conversing, and it's to each other we sit down and talk. And once we start doing that and connecting and helping each other out, there's millions of conversations going on all over the planet, as Jamin points out all the time. The problem is that we're not connected properly. We're not actually making the connections and helping each other and trying to figure out what the problems are and how do we deal with them. And that is, in essence, what Germany is trying to achieve, what we're trying to achieve. And so our plan is to bring the conversation and hopefully start it off in Ireland this year. Early, we're planning for it this year. There's no date set yet, as we're still in the planning stages. But we're hoping to instigate the conversation in Ireland and get the conversation going as to what is going on in relation to our climate, our weather system, the global warming, war, threat of war, everything, food shortages. I mean, the whole system is falling apart around us, and we better sit down and start talking quick. So we want to initiate the conversation in Ireland because who better, as far as we're concerned? I know Jamin now will always big up the Irish because he's an American, and I know you have great time for the Irish, and of course I do too. I'm Irish, but what I'm saying is that even as an Irish person, I am proud to say that we are respected all over the world as a nation. We proved that over and over again through World Cups and everything else. We're respected all over the world as a people of an educated society, and we stand up for what's right. We proved that in the last situation when they tried to charge us for water and put water meters in our homes, when it's your actual right, your civil right to have your access to free drinking water. That has been, a United Nations agreement a long time ago, and we already pay for our water through our taxes anyway. So when they decided to privatise water then and charge people for water, nowhere was the Irish people going to take that. We already pay for it through our taxes, whether it's council taxes or private taxes or whatever you're paying for your water, it's all included. Why pay for it a second time? That is basically greed and downright wrong. And the Irish people stood up and said, no, we're not doing that. And it's the right way. That's because it's the right thing to do. And I know myself, I obviously am a proud Irish person, so I know myself that when the Irish people hear what the situations are, when most people are not aware of what the situation is really when it comes to global warming. We only hear what's on the mainstream, and that's nothing, absolutely nothing to what the truth is of what's going on around us and how imminent our problems are bearing down on us. The food shortages and everything else, and water shortages, and the drying up of water all over, like in the west of America with the drought that they've been having for the last 20 years now. This is all bearing down on us very, very quickly now. And we need to have these conversations. So I'm going on too long. Sorry, I'll let her off to Jamin.
Go ahead, Jamin.
Oh, thank you. Good, great stuff, James and Sailesh. Loving the conversation. And James is absolutely right that these conversations about the future of life on Earth and what we need to do and how we need to evolve, they're happening all over the place. They're just completely fragmented, right? And as you know, as a systems engineer, Silas, creating a system or a system of systems that's going to bring humanity together in conversation, right, as a vast, hyper connected network of conversations, which is our vision, which I know we share with you, Silas, and so many people. It's a big challenge. How are we going to do it? Right? How do you create a vast planetary scale, decentralized, hyper connected network of conversations? That's the challenge in front of us, right? And we've been grappling with this challenge for several years now, dreaming into a planetary collective superintelligence and taking whatever steps we can to get there. And it suddenly dawned on us after the success of COP26. The three of us were at COP26, and we made a success out of what was otherwise a massive failure of governments to come together and have the conversation. We brought the conversation to the people through our live performances and music and posters and everything that we did. Giant inflatable animals that you brought over, Sailesh. Brilliant stuff. So what from the success of that, which was a success of concentration, a bunch of people coming together, in this case in one city, Glasgow, Scotland, and making an intensive effort, we said, why don't we do that in Ireland? It's an island, less than 10 million people, it's bounded. You can drive from one end to the other in a day, no problem. And so why don't we do like a concentrated experiment in this one island nation, a First Nation of Indigenous people who have an amazing conversational culture and an amazing tendency to get right to the heart of stuff, not dance around. No. Boom. Let's get right to the heart of it. And given James is an Irish superstar as far as I'm concerned. He'll be the last person to call himself that, but he is. And a number of other folks that we've made contact with in Ireland that are game, and people like yourself and people from other countries are willing to come together in Ireland to do this. So the idea is that we start, and this hopefully this at some point this summer. We haven't set the date yet with a lot of moving parts here, but we want to do a tour, do press conferences, do conversations and talks at universities that involve audiences who can then get up to the microphone and jump into the conversations themselves, and start out with the truth about global warming, the truth about the collapse of the biosphere, sixth mass extinction, etc. And just say, look, it's time for a conversation. We've all by default been relying on governments to figure this out. They're not doing anything to solve the problem. They're making it much, much worse. So it's up to us, the people, to come together. So we're starting in Ireland. We're basically saying, hey, Ireland, how about it? You have all these wonderful qualities as a people, as a culture. How about it? And so in a sense, we're going to be orchestrating Ireland jumping into this vital conversation and showing the world how it's done. Because once we get a critical mass of conversations going on in Ireland, there's, as James said, there is so much love for Ireland and respect and admiration and awe of Ireland. And the Irish diaspora numbers 700 million around the world. So they're going to pay attention, and they're going to see all these wonderful Irish people just in this wonderful conversation about how we can transform and save life on Earth. They're going to be inspired to jump in. People from around the world are going to be inspired to jump in. So it's all about finding that point where we can create a concentration that will start to transform and then let it spread from there. So that's the big idea. Happy to answer any questions. Loving this conversation. Passing back the feather.
Yeah, thank you, Jamin. I mean, it is, in my experience, we come together as a group of people to solve a common problem. When we have a common purpose, We have something common that we can all agree on, that we are all working towards. And to me, climate change and recognizing that climate change is caused by human beings was one such point in which we can all agree on and then start working towards, okay, how do you stabilize it? Okay. So I was expecting our leaders to say, okay, now we have a common objective. We can all work together on towards the common objective, and therefore get the collective intelligence of humanity, to rise up to the occasion, right? Because, like in any engineering project, as you know, one person couldn't have done it. So if you look at something that like a laptop, hundreds and thousands of people worked on it to make that happen. No one person could have designed it by themselves or implemented it by themselves, right? So that's collective intelligence at play. And so in this new quest, I mean, now I think I can say that 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I forgive people for not knowing what our common purpose is as a species. Now we do. And this is why me COP26 was so disappointing, because there is enough of a consensus now that we're changing the climate of the planet. We human beings are doing it. And we caused the pandemic. We know that too. And yet, our leaders basically kicked the can down the road, to 2030 at COP26. So Ray is asking the question, how will collective intelligence uh, change the course of a connected human race? How will that, what do we need to do to tap into the collective intelligence? And then how will that change the course of connected human race? Let's start with you, Jamin.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you, Ray, for the question. Ray is, of course, a part of the collective intelligence. And so let's take a quick moment and just imagine into what we mean by collective intelligence or collective superintelligence. So imagine if even 1% of humanity is engaged in conversation, in this kind of hyper-connected conversation. 1% of humanity is 80 million people. Imagine on average there are 8 people in a conversation. That means 10 million conversations. Can you imagine 10 million conversations going on in parallel that are all up on some giant database, an interface that you can navigate through and search for conversations by topic, by objective, by culture, by all kinds of complex criteria. And basically in this context, see, for me, this is the ideal conversation for me right now. I'm so happy to be with the two of you and broadcasting this conversation. Likewise, for any given human being, there is a conversation, a singular conversation that if they were in that conversation right now, their life would be transforming right now. They'd be learning something. They'd be able to express themselves in some way that's been suppressed. They'd be able to tap into their passion. They'd be able to find out that they're not alone in pursuing their passion or pursuing a certain line of inquiry, right? So we need to facilitate each and every one of these 80 million people, the 1% of humanity that chooses to get into the game and take the lead on this. We need to help each and every one of those people find the conversation that they need to be in right now, so that they can either learn what they need to learn or express what they need to express, so that other people can learn from them, and that ultimately teams, communities, organizations, movements can form out of all this. Because out of all these millions of conversations, the best ideas will bubble to the top. That's part of the challenge of collective intelligence, is how do we facilitate the best ideas bubbling to the top versus the ideas of some cabal, the world's billionaires, being forced to the top by one means or another. So collective intelligence will radically transform life on Earth when we as humanity embrace collective intelligence and embrace the fundamental democracy of humanity coming together in conversation and letting the best ideas bubble to the top, not the most powerful people who have hoarded the most resources bubble to the top and enforce their will, but let the will of humanity be expressed through this network of conversations. So once we get there, oh my goodness, it's just going to be like this planetary popcorn machine of great ideas bubbling around and building up. And then those ideas, once an idea is sufficiently perfected, now let's go to implementation. Let's actually design what needs to be designed so that that idea can be expressed in the world, whether it's cooling the planet through solar radiation management, whether it's feeding everyone through food healers and transforming our diet to a plant-based food, to transforming our agricultural systems, et cetera. And as we've seen firsthand through food healers, by feeding everyone plant-based foods for free, we transform people, we transform community. And so as we get some of these early successes from collective intelligence being implemented in the world and changing people's lives, more and more people will get into it. And it'll simply become the thing to do. Is, you wake up in the morning, well, what do we need to change? Well, this, or the other. Well, let me plug into the collective intelligence and see who I can work with to make these changes happen. So with all this technology that we have, with internet, with video conferencing and all that, it's right in front of us. We just have to connect the dots and get there to that place of a hyper-connected planetary scale network of conversations. That is collective intelligence, and it will change everything. The rate of innovation will just explode as we unshackle ourselves from previous constraints, that the only place that you should really apply your creativity is within some business where you can make money, and you just focus on that, chopping down mahogany trees, selling board feet of lumber until you've gotten to the very last tree. And there you are, staring the very last mahogany tree in the face. What do? You break out your chainsaw, chop it down without another thought. That's the track we're on. We need to radically shift to a whole new modality where we're looking out for each other and for all of life on Earth, and expressing that intention through conversation, coming to the campfire with wherever we're at. And I didn't know what we were going to be talking about today, but I knew that by talking with the two of you, we're going to make good progress. And that's what we're doing right now. And that's what the world needs. And with that, I pass back the feather.
So, what do you say to those who claim that the best ideas are the ones that are proposed by those who have hoarded the most, because they are smart enough to have hoarded the most?
So what I say to that is, they're actually right. If the game that you're playing, and if our definition of best is what allows me to accumulate even more. So of course, the ones who've succeeded at hoarding the most, they're the most competent at hoarding, period. So of course, they'll come up with the best ideas for hoarding. The only problem is, as we take, we're destroying life on Earth. So the wealthiest people are the best at playing the wrong game, the omnicidal game of take everything from me and leave a scorched earth behind. And that's what I have to say to that. Thanks.
Nicely done, Jamin. So, tell us a bit about your plans for food healers and your plans for Ireland. Are there any firm plans yet, or is it just an idea still?
Yeah. Well, so we're in the planning stages. Where we know we want to give a press conference in Dublin. We know we want to give a press conference in Cork. We know we want to have meetings all around the country. And as far as food healers, you and I and many others, Sarah and many other folks, have put the focus on Southern California. I'll meet you there this weekend, and we'll be making food and serving food to the whole community. We would love to bring that to Ireland as well. The first thing we're focusing on is the tour itself and the conversations. Once we get, some dates and locations established, then we can see, can we put food on top of that and bring food healers to Ireland as well? I would absolutely love to do that, because food and conversation go together. And with that, I'll pass it over to James, who's done a lot of thinking on this as well.
Well, as James said, we're hoping to get something sorted by summer now, because we were in the we were in planning stages a couple of weeks back anyway. But you know, these things take a little time, and we've learned a few lessons along the way, and you know, we've had a number of different attempts at our, at our, what's our mission statement? What is it we want to actually be? What is it we want to actually get discussed, and what do we want to get the message across? What message do we want to get across? And so we worked on that, and I think it'd be beneficial if Jamin actually read that, because it gives you a better idea of what it is we are trying to achieve in Ireland. Because I think our mission statement says it all. No, at this stage we kind of more or less got to finalise, and so I suppose at the end of the day, where are we? Where are we at the end of the day? Where do we find ourselves now? We find ourselves in a really, really, really nasty position, but we have only ourselves to thank for that. We created it. And I know that it seems like it's a vastly impossible task to try and change life as we know it, our systems as we know it. I mean, to even try and convince people still at this moment in time that we need to be off of fossil fuels and on, clean energy is still a battle, while, the systems are collapsing around on top of us. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, it will take until, the ceiling is actually caving in before they realize they have to put their hands up to stop it. But we're hoping that by engaging people in conversation, by presenting it the right way and showing them how important it is to engage in conversation, that at least we won't have to wait for every single person to realize the ceiling is collapsing before they all put their hands up together. We, as James said, we only need 1% of the planet really to get involved in the conversations. It's enough, because anyone who chooses to get involved in these conversations, and let's face it, these are the conversations to be had. We're in the game of our lives now, literally. We're in the game of our lives and all of life on Earth. And I'm not saying this out of the top of my hat. I'm repeating now rhetoric from the IPCC. We have about 2 years to act, or we're in the game of our lives. So we need to be in the conversation of our lives as well. So if there's ever the time now for us to get our act together, it's now. And we created this mess, so it's not impossible for us to get ourselves out of it. And it's the right thing to do at the end of the day. I'll always maintain it's the right thing to do. And as long as I have a breath in me, I'll keep doing it. Even if I feel that I'm banging my head against the wall, I'll keep doing it. Because I have my daughter and my family and my lovely nieces and grandnieces and nephews, my extended family, my community. I love all these people. And I have my country. We all have our countries. We have a global community. But we have to not forget that there's millions of other species out there that if they're gone, we're gone too anyway. So we all need each other. They need us just as much as we need them, and we need to get our act together now. So we're going to start this conversation in Ireland.
On that note, thank you so much, both of you. Actually, as Donald Meadows also said, even if I know I'm going to die tomorrow, I'll plant a tree today. So that's the level of optimism that you bring to this. Because life, as long as life is alive, will want to thrive. So thank you so much, both of you.